Talking about.
Oh yeah.
We want to bring in another friend, and we'd like to welcome to the magic screen. Johnny Basset is with us, the data and research editor from Granite State News Collaborative. How you doing, Johnny?
Good. How are you doing?
Good. Good to see you. The Granite State News Collaborative is a statewide multimedia news collaborative that draws on and amplifies the strengths of its 20 members to expand and add missing dimensions to coverage of issues of concern to the New Hampshire public as a whole, as well as to particular communities. And nowadays, the news landscape changes daily, and you need other perspectives out there, and that's part of what you guys do, right? What was the impetus to start the collaborative?
Yeah, so the collaborative started a couple of years ago when, as we know, outlets across the state started to have some trouble, and there just wasn't as much funding available to resource the journalists, and so local coverage started to suffer. And so what people started thinking was that, well, maybe we should start sharing resources between outlets, and it should be more of a cooperative process, even though we're still competitors and still racing to get the headlines, trying to make sure that everybody will get through the hard times that journalism is going on now. And that really came together at the beginning of the pandemic, because then, as we all know, things got really tight. And so the collaborative started doing two things, and that's what we do now. We started sharing articles between the outlets, and so that lets a newspaper in Berlin, for example, take advantage of reporting that was done in Concord or in Keene or on the seacoast. And then we also do our own original reporting, and those are we focus on statewide investigations that no single outlet would have the resources to do on their own. Those are the two things that we do now, and that's how it came together.
When you were talking about being a collaborative and sharing stories, that is so crucial for print journalism today and online journalism, because they just don't have the funds to pay reporters to be all over the state like they used to. So that sharing network creates, great reporting from all over the state, and it's pretty much reachable for everybody.
Yeah, and Johnny, what do you see from your perspective now that you're rallying these resources? From your perspective, what's lost if we don't have these kinds of collaboratives and events or decisions are made without any real fourth estate scrutiny?
Well, I mean, for one, people just don't know what's going on in their communities. And if you don't know the story of your community, you're not going to identify with it. You're not going to get engaged with the issues. You're not going to know what to stand up for if something's important to you, because you don't even know that it's going on. So if things are just happening and they're passing everybody by and you just don't know about it, things start to unravel really quickly. And especially if all you're getting is national news that has no grounding in the local reality, things get pretty warped really quickly. And we see that in different ways, but that's our belief in the collaborative, that local journalism is really worth fighting for. And the collaborative is our way of doing that by making it more cooperative.
You're 100% right, because, we live in a state that used to, news was everything, right? The local newspaper reported on every minute of a city council meeting. You knew what was happening in your town. You knew what the decisions that were being made or what the options were, and you got involved. But nowadays, we live in a time, obviously, where the media is everywhere. It's almost overwhelming, especially with the opinion-driven, and regardless of side, the opinion-driven media that's out there today. You're serving a purpose that is vital to the small towns throughout New Hampshire. That this is what we existed on for many, many years, and it's just as important now today, because that's how you find out what's going on in your own community. So, good work.
Yeah.
Johnny, another piece to this, too, is the newsrooms themselves that are struggling to try to figure out how to remain in operation. What sorts of feedback are you getting from news directors, folks that are having to put a product out every day, to talk about what's gone on over the last 24 hours, about how important this collaborative effort is?
Well, the one thing that hasn't changed is that each of the outlets know their own communities better than anybody else. So they've kept up that rhythm, and they've continued to publish those articles that are of the most importance to their local readers. But what we have heard, and what's been really fun for us to hear, is that we've been able to help outlets across the state hear about things going on the other side of the state that they otherwise wouldn't have heard about, but they can now offer it to their readers in their own pages. And that was especially true during COVID. So one of the things that we started doing was all of the outlets started contributing their COVID reporting. Some of that was data driven, some of that was traditional reporting. and we released that to all of the outlets at the same time. And that let everybody get on the same page and keep up when everybody's resources were being stretched the thinnest.
That's great.
You're the collaborative's doing with NHPBS is doing a collaborative public affairs program called The State We're In. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so my fearless leader and my boss, Melanie Plenda, is the host of State We're In. And so every week what she does is she talks with key decision makers or journalists who are working on the big issues that we're reading about in the news that week. And it's a 25-minute program where they just talk it through and give people a different way to engage with the issues if they're not seeing it in print.
Sure. That's great. And you're also working on, with the collaborative, a multi-year effort to deal with race and equity issues. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, so I mean, race and equity those are issues that people are talking about all over the country, and they show up in a unique form in New Hampshire. And so it's really important that we localize it and we figure out how this applies to us, to what extent and in what ways these issues apply to us. But of course, equity and race are really broad issues, and so they have lots of different aspects. And so some of those things are school funding issues, which we've been talking about for ages in New Hampshire, or about police reforms, things like that. So these issues, they've come up through COVID, they've come up through education-related issues, through State House reporting, through housing market issues. That's what we've been reporting a lot on recently. So that's the broad umbrella that we're using to unite a lot of the work that all of our outlets are doing. And we help to weave it together and then add our own original reporting on top of that.
That's great.
We've talked a lot throughout the last day about how nonprofit organizations are the fabric, the fabric that binds all of our communities. And I would add to that local reporting is as well. It's, in a way, as I sit here and I listen to you talk, I'm kind of thinking that you're keeping the small town newspaper alive in 2022.
No doubt.
Just with that shared perspective of local reporting, which is so important, which, we've seemed to lost track of that, so I think the work you're doing is very important. So congratulations.
Yeah. And our best to Melanie Plenda, because this really is an operation, a nonprofit exercise of information sharing and First Amendment free speech.
Absolutely.
Information pieces that are just so critical to the people of New Hampshire and the decisions that we all make, because an informed public makes better decisions. Sure. So we appreciate you, Johnny, and thank you for your effort with the collaborative.
Thank you.
You got it.
It's great.
Johnny Basset, data and research editor of the Granite State News Collaborative.
It's great.
It was every day it was about reading the paper.
Right?
Every single day it was about, and Sunday reading it was the local paper. I wasn't reading the Boston Globe, man. I was reading the Foster's Daily Democrat.
When I started radio in the early 90s, myself doing news, I was one of 5 reporters in a radio station that was not a nonprofit exercise.
Sure.
And so there was a full team of us just working in Greater Manchester AM radio.
And what year was that?
That was 1993, 94.
I had been in radio 7 years when that happened. I'm old. You probably saw me on Jurassic Park. I was one of the dinosaurs. I don't know if you knew that. Whatever.
Velociraptor right here. But that just shows the resources like that non-existent in traditional media. It's shifting technology, and with that, we have to make sure that we figure out how to invest those resources to make sure those stories are still told.
But that's the great thing about the Granite State News Collaborative is they're keeping that old-fashioned, and I don't want to say that because it makes it sound less important. That sort of frame of mind and that viewpoint, traditional, current, by doing what they do. So that's important work right there.
I'm seeing.